In 1987, the world watched Eliot Ness throw Frank Nitti off a roof. We watched Sean Connery teach him the Chicago way. It is a perfect story, a perfect hero, and almost none of it is true. Today, we are looking at the real Untouchables. The Native American scout the movie ignored, the serial killer Ness couldn't catch, and the tragic, lonely death of the man who brought down Al Capone. The Hollywood version of Eliot Ness is a story of desperation. A lonely lawman, forced to recruit a streetwise beat cop, an aging veteran, and a hotshot rookie to take on the most powerful gangster. In America, the reality, however, was far more calculated and, in many ways, more impressive. Eliot Ness wasn't desperate. He was methodical. He didn't just stumble upon his team. He handpicked a squad of elite agents, each chosen for a specific, lethal skill. This wasn't a last-ditch effort. It was a surgical strike force. These weren't just any Treasury agents. Ness assembled a team of specialists from across the country, men who were the best at what they did. He recruited agents like Lyle Chapman, a former college football star who was as brilliant as he was tough, the intellectual engine of the operation. He brought in William Gardner, a member of the Ojibwe tribe. Gardner was an expert scout and tracker, a skill honed in the wilderness that he now applied to the urban jungle of Chicago. Standing well over 6 feet tall, his presence was as intimidating as his surveillance skills were subtle. Then there was Joseph Leeson, a driver so skilled he was practically a ghost. Leeson could tail a mobster-esque car through the chaotic labyrinth of 1930s Chicago traffic without ever being spotted. This team wasn't a ragtag group of misfits. It was a finely tuned machine, meticulously designed with one purpose: to dismantle Al Capone's empire piece by piece. The 1987 film gives us one of the most iconic shootouts in cinema history, the slow-motion gun battle on the steps of Union Station. It's a masterpiece of tension and violence. But the real war against Capone wasn't one with Tommy guns and bloodshed. It was one with something far less glamorous: paperwork. The real weapon of the Untouchables wasn't lead. It was ledgers. The true battleground wasn't the streets of Chicago, but stuffy, smoke-filled rooms where men with headphones spent thousands of hours listening to gangsters talk. They listened to coded conversations about beer deliveries, illegal shipments, and profit margins. It was a war of attrition, fought through sheer boredom and relentless dedication. The Untouchables' strategy was to bleed Capone's organization dry. They intercepted his trucks, not to start a gunfight, but to confiscate the illicit booze and cut off his revenue. They raided his hidden breweries, shutting down his production lines one by one. Every raid, every wiretap, every seized asset was a small cut, slowly draining the lifeblood from the Chicago outfit. And the movie's climactic confrontation? Frank Nitti wasn't thrown off a courthouse roof by Ness. In reality, Nitti took over the Chicago mob after Capone was finally sent to prison. He continued to run the organization for years. The final, decisive blow against Al Capone wasn't a moment of violent, cinematic revenge. It was the quiet, methodical work of forensic accountants. The ultimate victory was a tax audit. After his monumental victory in Chicago, you might think Eliot Ness would retire a celebrated hero. content to live off his legendary reputation. But that's not what happened. Instead, he took on a new, even more challenging role: Director of Public Safety in Cleveland, Ohio. His mission was to clean up a city plagued by corruption and crime. And it was here, in Cleveland, that the hero's triumphant journey takes a dark and tragic turn. Morphing into a real-life horror story, Ness was confronted with a case that would haunt him for the rest of his life: the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. This was a serial killer unlike any other, a phantom who terrorized the city, leaving a trail of dismembered bodies. Over several years, the Mad Butcher claimed at least 12 victims. Their remains often discovered in a desolate shantytown area known as Kingsbury Run. Ness, the man who had outsmarted Al Capone, became obsessed with catching this new, more monstrous foe. He poured all his resources into the investigation, but the killer was always one step ahead. Leaving no clues, no witnesses, and no clear motive, the pressure mounted, and Ness grew increasingly desperate. In a moment of extreme frustration, believing the killer was hiding among the impoverished residents of the shantytown, Ness made a fateful decision. He ordered the entire area to be burned to the ground. This act, meant to flush out a monster, backfired spectacularly. The public, once supportive of their famous lawman, turned against him. The press, which had once hailed him as a hero, now labeled him a failure, a tyrant who had destroyed the homes of the city's most vulnerable. The man who caught Capone couldn't catch the butcher. The case was never officially solved, and it became a permanent stain on his legacy. The one adversary he could never defeat. The final years of Eliot Ness were not a victory lap. They were a slow, quiet descent into obscurity. He left public service and struggled to find his footing in the private sector. Moving from one failed business venture to another, the legendary lawman found himself buried in debt, a shadow of the figure he once was. He began to drink heavily, a lonely man telling stories of his glory days in bars to patrons who likely thought he was just another old man exaggerating his past. Who could believe that the man nursing a drink in the corner was the one who took down the most famous gangster in history? On May 16, 1957, Eliot Ness suffered a fatal heart attack in the kitchen of his home. He was only 54 years old. When he died, he had just over $1,000 to his name. And here lies the final, crushing irony of his life. He died just a few months before his memoir, The Untouchables, was published. He never knew that his story would become a sensation. He never saw the hit television show that would make his name a household word. He certainly never saw the blockbuster movie that would immortalize him, albeit inaccurately, as an American icon. He died believing he had been forgotten, his great accomplishments lost to time. Eliot Ness was the ultimate lawman, an incorruptible force for justice, who was ultimately destroyed not by a gangster's bullet, but by the quiet, relentless tragedy of time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more hidden histories.